There we go. So it's a great pleasure, thank you for inviting me. I was just thinking it's probably only the second time in my career that I've been billed with artists, so that's quite something. And I had to rack my brains to think how I was going to present to, for the second time, to a sort of non-scientific audience. So here goes, see what happens. My career, I suppose with hindsight, could be seen to have been dealing with different states of consciousness, states of mind. I was a schizophrenologist for a good part of my career. Then medical students got me into looking at the brain and hypnosis. Did hypnosis do anything to the brain? And it does. Then, for interesting reasons, Far Eastern people got me looking at energy medicine. And then I moved to Neurofeedback, which is what I'm going to tell you about today. Now, and I will select just one of the states of consciousness that we can induce with neurofeedback, and that's one that we induce with sounds, and hence its relevance for the topic today. Now, oops, we missed one. Yeah. So what is hypnagogia? It's the transition between waking and sleeping, or vice versa, where it's called hypnopompia. And we have sort of fragmentary experience, really, whether it's sensory or cognitive. And there is a slowing to our brain waves, as recorded by the EEG, the electroencephalogram. And that's going to be the bulk of where I'm going to be going. But I thought you would be interested to know that we have to turn to a novelist and philosopher to actually do a lot of the work in looking at the history of ideas to show that this is an extraordinarily creative state. So Arthur Koestler, the novelist and philosopher, in his book The Act of Creation in the 60s, drew together a whole chapter of evidence, and I've just thrown down a few things here. But you have chemists who actually, in this case, envisaged the benzene ring in this hypnagogic state, and did the hugely unorthodox thing of, in his scientific talk, saying, "Let us learn to dream, gentlemen." In other words, let's get down to this state and we'll be more creative in our work. And Van der Enck, and this is clearly a terribly awful translation, the few original ideas I imagine myself to have conceived as my original contribution to science have come just before sleep. Enormous number of writers knowing about this have tried to get into this state using all sorts of routes, actually, all sorts of potions as well. The mathematician Poincaré evolved the Fuchsian functions in this way. And piece here for our host, Jean Cocteau, who was polymath, among other things, he wrote plays. And he put it this way: the poet is at the disposal of his knight, who must clean his house and await its visitation. And what that means is that, this doesn't actually come totally out of the blue. You have to do groundwork, and then, of course, switch off and just let things happen. And in his case, he got whole scenarios of plays when he was waking up out of sleep. So, the EEG, as I said. So, by placing sensors on the head, we can amplify the rhythmic activity of the brain, which represents our neuronal activity. And putting it simply, we get a spectrum of activity from very slow waves to very fast waves. And these are classified with these labels here. So this is in a very deep stage of sleep. As we traverse to waking, we have the theta rhythm, so that's the one associated with hypnagogia. Alpha got very famous in the flower power period of the 60s, people would try to engage in this to meditate. This occurs when we close our eyes in particular, or we have a very relaxed, focused attention. Above that, we have something called the sensory motor rhythm. I'll tell you a bit about that very much at the end. This is relaxed thought, where the body is still. It's when the cat has seen a mouse hole and he crouches, waiting and ready to spring when the mouse comes out of the hole. So he's very, very relaxed and immobile. He's watching. Then we have the beta activity, which is what most of us are exhibiting now, which can proceed into higher states of excitement and so on. Now that's very simplistic. All of these rhythms are buzzing around in our heads all the time, but in different degrees. And a big area of neuroscience currently is looking at the very subtle nuances of these rhythms. That's a huge field. But this is all we need to know about tonight. Neurofeedback. So what happens here is that we are feeding back to the participant who's having their brain rhythms recorded a representation of them in real time. So they can adjust their rhythms and with a representation on a computer screen try to control and regulate them. So it's called the neurofeedback loop. So here we have participant, sensors here which are amplified and fed into a computer, which is then programmed to produce some sort of scenario on another screen here, which the participant watches. And things can happen on that screen as we, as the scientist or trainer, want to see encouraged. So, for example, we show this in this way. We could have a lotus flower which opens or closes according to whether you're turning on the rhythm that we want them to see. And for children, that's a nice sort of display. An adult might just simply need a bar like this, which goes up or down according to their success in this. So the instruction is to just relax and let things happen. Let that bar go up. And then when that happens, that reinforces you. You're mastering it, and you continue to do this. Meanwhile, the trainer is adjusting the thresholds to enable this to happen either more easily if the person is not succeeding, or more challengingly if they're succeeding really rather well, so that you actually get more and more of an amplification of a particular rhythm. Now with hypnagogia, the eyes are closed, so you've got no visual image that the person is looking at. And the reinforcement is through sounds. So here you can see it's quite innocuous and simple. Here's a student, a musician, with sensors attached. You can't see there's one here. And here I am, this is 15 years ago, sitting at my laptop, mastering things. Again, here we go, you can see a laptop screen, just very simple attachments involved here. So, why is this called alpha-theta training? That is the one that induces hypnagogia. Well, if we look at this spectrum, we've got the alpha here and the theta here. And basically, the moment we close our eyes, most people turn on alpha. So that's quite an easy thing to achieve. So basically, you start off reinforcing this. So what happens is, you sit there, your eyes are closed, and you're told that when you hear the beautiful sounds, just let them happen, and let more beautiful sounds occur. So it's really quite a passive and relaxing thing to do. And we'll have one beautiful sound associated with whenever alpha rises up to a certain threshold that we're predetermined, and another sound associated with theta. The sound that everybody loves is waves slowly crashing on the shore in a rhythmic way. That's the one we choose for theta activity. And at the end of the session, so along here we see timed 25-minute session, this was an extraordinary young man who, when our first studies were publicised in the media, he phoned me up. He was a Thai boxer. He said his ambition in life was to have the mental control of the Dalai Lama, and he had a huge library of gizmos at home, tapes, DVDs, you know, and he would pluck one off each night and go through it to become, you know, more relaxed into the state of consciousness of the Dalai Lama. And one of my students needed somebody to practice on, so in he came. And what you see here are the different rhythms color-coded, alpha, delta, theta, beta, etc. And here we're reinforcing with these beautiful sounds the theta rhythm, and see how we can actually achieve that. So it rises above the others, which is just business as usual, and comes down. And I saw this, I walked in afterwards, and without putting ideas in his head, you'd say, well, you know, how was it for you today? This was actually the second time you'd come. He said, wow, he said, I've never experienced that. His actual words were, my cup of life is full, and boy, do I want to have that again. And so that was his experience in having his theta elevated really quite remarkably, I have to say. We don't always see anything as extreme as that. So all I'm going to do today, because the time frame is very, very tight, is to tell you about the applications to the performing arts that I began first with the Royal College of Music when I was at Imperial, and then carried on at Goldsmiths, and have applied to musicians, dancers, competitive ballroom, Latin dancing, contemporary dance, children's music in school in Brixton, and acting. Now, I'm just going to really exemplify the results from the Royal College of Music's work, which we began with. So the idea is that, and this is a flow diagram of how our studies would be designed, first of all, the students would perform for us, then they would be randomized to a number of different interventions. So this was really quite a big study with a lot of colleagues. Randomized means they can't choose which of these training procedures we're going to put them in. That means that then they're free of bias. And you can see we actually tried 6 things in this particular year. The Alexander technique, I don't know how many of you know about it. It's a technique, Alexander was a Tasmanian, and it's just set light in all performing arts conservatoires in the Western world at least. And it's all to do with postural readjustment, which then leads to bodily relaxation and can carry over to cognitive relaxation as well. It was being done at the Royal College of Music, and the tutors wanted to come in on the study. Another practitioner taught them aerobic exercise, and they went to a high-class gym in Kensington. A sports psychologist did mental skills training. This is where you cognitively analyze your performance for those things that are good about it and those things that are bad about it, and then you address them cognitively. And then over here, we tried 3 different forms of brain rhythm training. The alpha theta, and then the faster wave here. And then the students would perform again for us. This would be carried out over a term, 10 sessions a week. The performances would be filmed, and then the order was jumbled up so that experts, professors in music, would go through these film clips on a wet Sunday afternoon or something and evaluate the performance on scales that I'll show you. They didn't know whether any film clip was before training or after training, or what group the students had been assigned to. And here was some scientific results. Now, how you actually read this is that this middle line along here would indicate no change whatsoever in the professor's evaluations. And the bars going up indicate an improvement, and otherwise no improvement. And when you look at the kinds of things that the professors who blind rated these saw improved, apart from the overall quality, musical understanding, stylistic accuracy, and interpretive imagination, which actually scored the best. There were 3 professors doing this independently of one another. Now, to give you a feel for the kinds of things that they were rating them for, now in the music world, performance measurement has been really well worked out, and there's the associated boards of the Royal Schools of Music who have come together to agree how to assess students' performance. And music is divided into 3 domains: technique, and these are the kinds of aspects of technique, musicality, and communication to the audience. So that's the kind of thing that we're dealing with. And we've done now many studies, 8 performing arts studies in all. The first funding after the 2 initial Royal College of Music studies were to see what would happen to novice musical abilities. Okay, we can enhance even the virtuoso, but what would happen to you and my musical abilities? So we were funded to do that, and that included children in a school in Brixton, 11-year-olds, and it also involved instrumentalists at Trinity Laban, who we chose, who had no singing ability or desire to sing. And then we could look at what we could do with their singing ability, at the same time look at their more advanced abilities too, their instrumental ability. We turned to dance, the Imperial College competitive university ballroom and Latin dance team. Again, we got exciting results in enhancing their artistry in dancing. It so happened they won the UK Championship. We looked at contemporary dance at Laban, and then we've carried out studies with acting as well. So I'm not going to lay all that out, it would take an hour. But basically what we ended up with was that this hypnagogic training was always effective in enhancing creativity in the performing arts, whether it was acting or dancing or music, and also impacted on communication, particularly with lower level musical abilities, where people were more amateur and less assured. Obviously, Royal College of Music students all want to be superstars, and they don't need assurance and performance, but we did enhance it in them too. And sometimes we also enhanced their actual technical abilities. So that was the bottom line. So this taking you down into this hypnagogic experience seemed to have these huge benefits for performance, particularly creativity in performance. Now, one of our most sophisticated musicians wrote these thoughts for us as to how it actually feels to her to be in this alpha-beta state. During the training sessions, I feel extremely relaxed, fine, as though my mind is able to freely glide with my creative ideas, bringing a new kind of spontaneity and energy to my thought processes. And this is a very, very common experience. Even though you're sort of at a borderline of waking, sleeping, there's a sort of energetic factor here. The extraction of this specific mode of performance gives me the opportunity to explore other areas of creativity that were previously unavailable to me, as I'm free from the physical act of playing the piano, whilst mentally being in the state of performance. And that gives a very important clue to the way we go about this. When we put someone into this training context, we don't say, oh, just lie there and, have a nice time. We're saying, okay, this is empowering. When you get down and you hear those sounds, you can achieve anything you want to achieve. And of course that's left to the individual, what they want to achieve. Of course, musicians in these contexts of performing arts, they want to be starry performers. So they're in the state, and while they're in the state, they're in the relevant state for them and will be empowered by it. It's very satisfying, etc. And this is another key thing. It's almost as though I've been introduced to thinking of nothing, which then takes me to a place where creative possibilities seem boundless. Whoa, I'm going over. Okay, I speed up. So what's going on here? So there are other routes to this, instead of neurofeedback. Meditation is another, and this is colleagues in Siberia who are looking at the sensors all over the head here. You can put on this sensor cap. This is the front of the brain, this is the back, the left hemisphere, the right. This is a study contrasting the theta achieved in experienced meditators compared with novices. And the lines are where there's connectivity in the theta rhythm in these different brain areas. And what you see is the experienced meditators have a much more connected brain. Now, memory is laid down right throughout the brain. The slow rhythms are different from the fast rhythms in that they traverse the whole brain, whereas fast rhythms are much more focal. So this is why, when you get down to these slower rhythms, they're traversing the brain and therefore connecting up areas that in the everyday life are not connected up, which is how you get the Kursler kind of phenomenon of putting two and two ideas together, which are already in the brain but haven't been interconnected. But that's just one aspect, because the other thing about this is that people feel empowered. And the theta rhythm taps into the emotion circuits in the brain and thereby gives rise to this empowerment feeling. Just one last thing. Hypnagogia is not the only route to creativity. Creativity is a hugely complex thing. But in acting, there is, as I learned when I worked in RADA, what the acting profession calls listening in performance. And this is what really gives authenticity to performance. Instead of just spouting text back and forth, as I saw happening yesterday in Richard III at the Almeida, with younger actors, that's very unconvincing. If you think of looking at Mark Rylance as Thomas Cromwell on Bridge of Spies, you see a mind working. To do this, the mind has got to be slowed down, and that's the actual rhythm here, which I told you about, the cat waiting to pounce on the mouse when it appeared. This can be trained in the waking state in actors, and we found huge impact on professors of acting evaluating the film clips of the actors in performance. Their creativity in acting went through the roof. And interestingly, we also analysed what the actors felt about their acting the minute they got off the stage with particular flow state scales. And the more flow they claimed to have felt so happened to fit totally with the professor's evaluation of whether they had improved or not. Finally, these are a slog of, these are very, very difficult studies to pull off. They take over a year. They're a logistical nightmare. You can go into an institution, you can't have people coming to Goldsmiths, they'll never do it. We have to go to them. There's no space. We adapt broom cupboards and God knows stationery cupboards in institutions because there isn't anywhere else for us. There can be regime change while you're there and suddenly the new director doesn't want you. It's been quite a struggle, and I have to acknowledge all my postgraduate students and postdocs who have done all the slog work involved in this. And here we are one autumn afternoon on the village green in Goldsmiths. And then prior to that, the team at the Royal College of Music at Imperial, again, postgraduate students who did all this training. And here I'm talking to the president of the Royal College of Music at the end of year line-out, trying to, in a couple of words, explain to him why we're in this line-up, what we've been doing. And you can see with the passage of time that both the president and I have undergone, shall we say, maturational changes. we're relatively unrecognisable, I think. So that's all I wanted to say, and just finally, if you want to know more about this, there's a hugely enterprising outfit, a website called ResearchGate, where all researchers have profiles, all their work is there for downloading. They give me a weekly email telling me how many people have read my work that week, who they are, which country they're from. You have all these statistics. How many people are actually citing my work around the world in any one week in new publications, and so on and so on. It's absolutely a mine of information, stuff that I would never have time to collate. And amongst the publications, there are actually two that are relevant to what I've spoken about today. One is this one here, published in 2014, and one that I forgot to add, which was published in 2009, which is called The Theory of Alpha Theta Training, etc., which happens to be my most read publication over the last 5 years, interestingly. So clearly people are interested in this, and I hope eventually it takes off. Thank you.